Welcome to Screams from the Center, where I talk about information on topics I find interesting and give my take on them. On this episode, the GOP debates. I'll be going and doing a very quick rundown of the GOP debates. And first off, let's tell you where they were broken up. It wasn't one giant debate, because even Fox News realized putting 17 idiots on a stage wasn't going to do anything. So at the Kiddie Table, as I call it, are candidates Rick Perry, Rick Santorum, Bobby Jindal, Carly Fiorina, Lindsey Graham, George Pataki, and Governor Gilmore. At the grown-up table, which was the primetime debate, the candidates were Donald Trump, Governor George Bush, Scott Walker, Mike Huckabee, Ben Carson, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Christie, and John Kasich. Now, I was originally going to kind of do a play-by-play or just a highlights of some of the questions, but after recording over 2 hours of video, I realized that this was going to be a daunting task. So I'm going to really cut this down and just go over some key things and kind of do a quick rundown of some basics that were presented in the debate. So without further ado, on with the show. So we started off the debates with kind of a question directed at each candidate to get their input. It was sort of a meet and greet type thing. Governor Rick Perry was asked basically that you weren't prepared in 2012. What makes you prepared now? And basically he was going over his record, saying, you know, how he created millions of jobs, how he sent the National Guard to the border, how he was building the fence, all this kind of stuff. And essentially, he really didn't answer that question. He just went over his record and tried to look smart because he's got the glasses on now. So they went to Carly Fiorina next, and they asked her, does she feel that, given her current standing in the polls, that a comparison that she had made at one point to Margaret Thatcher was valid? And I find, to be honest, I find a lot of these questions to be insulting overall. And, you know, she answered the question and basically, you know, touted her record as she was a great businesswoman, even though she laid off over 30,000 people at HP and almost drove it into the ground. So nothing too surprising here. But there is something interesting that happens later in the debate with Carly Fiorina. So we go to former Senator Rick Santorum, and basically the continuation of the Fox News Kiddie Table humiliation continues. They basically asked him, what's your relevance? You lost last time to Mitt Romney, who lost. So Rick Santorum said that the stuff that made him lose last time is going to make him win this time, because he fights for the people. He fights against corporations. He was the one that helped put sanctions against Iran, which supposedly brought them to the table to make the nuclear deal that they all hate and that he hates too. So Fox humiliates these guys, and they'll continue the humiliation. And there's plenty of other candidates, even in the primetime debate, that they humiliate. But that's basically the Rick Santorum thing. And I'm not going into detail about these things because basically they're just giving their history. I'm going to go over kind of their history and some points for and against each candidate in my candidate roundup. So I'm not going to dwell on it here. I'm just going to make a little bit of a commentary on each candidate and then go over some of the key questions from each debate. So Governor Jindal gets his embarrassing question of, your approval ratings are in the 30s in your home state. And you're dismal here because you're at the Kiddie Table, is what they'd like to say. How do you think people are going to relate to you, and how are you going to overcome that? And the first thing out of the gate was basically that he won his election. Of course, you're still governor. They call you governor, and they say you're a sitting governor. So you had to have won an election. The other thing that he points out is how much he cut the government. Yeah, Louisiana is suffering over that, and I'm sure I'll be going into some of that later on in other episodes as well. But, you know, again, went over his record. Bobby Jindal's uninteresting, and he stands no chance. My basic take from this is he is pushing for a position at Fox News, getting a book out, and going on speaking circuit when he gets done being governor. He is not going to be president, and he's not running for president. So for Senator Lindsey Graham, the question was, well, you worked with Hillary Clinton and the Democrats and such on certain aspects of climate change. And it's not a very popular topic with Republicans, at least not acknowledging that it's a real thing. So they asked him, what do you think people are going to respond on that? And he basically said that in the debates, it's not going to, with Hillary Clinton, it's not going to be about science, it's going to be about solutions. And basically his solutions are drill more. He says something about using less, drilling more here and using less here to become energy independent, and that he's tired of sending over $300 billion to people who hate our guts. He didn't really offer any actual thing, but it's basically going to boil down, and I think he gets asked this question later on, it's going to boil down to drilling more so that we don't have to import oil, but not actually expanding things like solar, wind, nuclear, geothermal, or investing more into fusion technology or other alternate energies. It's mostly just about drilling. He's going to approve the Keystone Pipeline. He's going to approve any kind of drilling projects onshore, offshore. That's basically the mantra that he's going. And I've done a write-up on my blog about the numbers in oil, and it's not a sustainable system. Now, I know conservatives argue with the idea that, well, let someone else worry about that down the road. Well, you know, no, because here you want us to pay the national debt off by cutting everything. But we can save the energy crisis that's going to happen, whether you believe in climate change or not. The energy crisis that will happen, that, fuck it, give it to the kids. But we got to pay the debt now. So that's what we're looking at. That's Lindsey Graham for you. So with Governor George Pataki, who was governor of New York, notably during 9/11, they asked him the same basic question as Rick Santorum. Why are you relevant? Now, the answer is you're not, because you're at the bottom of the polls. And he goes into this tirade about how, you know, he was there for 9/11. He's a big defense guy. He's going to take out ISIS. He's going, you know, he's learned his lesson from the last time that he ran because he spent time in the private sector. So he knows how businesses work. Again, using that narrative that America is either a family or a business, which it's neither. It's a government. And that's George Pataki. So last and certainly least is Governor Jim Gilmore, who I can't even remember his name. And this is probably going to be the only time that you hear me use his first name. He hasn't held public office in 13 years. But he basically gets on stage at his little introduction, and he talks about how he served in intelligence. He served in this. He was governor of the state that on 9/11 in Virginia. And basically, his narrative throughout the whole debate is going to be that of the tough guy. Now, he goes into a lot of the other regular talking points, but he does something interesting, which I will be notating later on down the road here. But that's Governor Jim Gilmore. So, the next question that was asked among the candidates is, is a totally disrespectful and embarrassing question by Fox. I'm not going to go into details about it other than they basically started it off with, let's talk about the elephant not in the room, referring to Donald Trump. So they asked some of the candidates questions revolving around Donald Trump. That is not a policy question. That is not a war question. That is an embarrassing question, asking about the guy who's in the lead and not even on stage. The candidates should be embarrassed for Fox News, and quite frankly, if I were any of them, whether some of these guys are bucking for a position there or not, I wouldn't take it. It's a total embarrassment. So they moved to the topic of foreign policy, specifically how to deal with ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call it. And most of this is the chance that everybody gets to show their penis to the world. And what I mean by this is, who's the toughest guy in the room? You've got George Pataki talking about how he was the tough governor during 9/11. And then they move on to like Carly Fiorina, who's asked basically a cyber question. Which case, I guess that makes sense. Was a CEO of a tech company. So they basically ask her about the NSA spying program. She says that she not only doesn't mind the NSA spying program, she wants to catch the bad guys in it. So she also wants to force the tech companies who've been resisting, and Google and Apple were specifically mentioned in this. She wants to force them to comply with these warrantless wiretaps and metadata collecting. Now, she was a very tough. It was a good question. She was very tough on it. Typical Republican response. But Governor Gilmore, he had to be a man. And he had to tell the woman to step aside. Men are talking. And he talked about how he's going to secure the border. He's going to actually go in and invade those countries and take out ISIS and ISIL. He's going to destroy our enemies. Interrupting her, basically. I mean, it was the end of her answer, and he formed a rebut. But that's essentially one of the only rebuts in the debate. Governor Gilmore went out of his way to step on Carly Fiorina in order to say the same thing that everybody is saying, that they're going to be tough on ISIL. Thank you, Governor. Whatever your first name is. So the next topic that they talk about is immigration. Santorum goes over how there's 11 plus million undocumented workers. He's one of the few people who mentions the Reagan amnesty. He talks about how his father was in fascist Mussolini, Italy, which in all honesty, someone like Rick Santorum probably would have liked. And then he goes in and starts blaming immigrants for stagnant wages and jobs lost. Not our trade policies and our current economic policies, but it's those immigrants, I tells you, the immigrants. They move on to Governor Rick Perry, who gets basically the same question. And Rick Perry talks about how this has been a question for 30 years. And he's right on this. We don't have immigration reform. And partly that is because of efforts like the people on stage who are against comprehensive immigration reform. So he talks about how he secured the border, how he sent the National Guard there. You know, the same thing with the ISIS talk. It's all tough guy bravado. Now, he says that a president, the next president, which is him, according to him, should wake up every morning and the first thing out of his mouth is along the lines of how much of the fence has been built. He talks about how big the border is at Texas, and he's basically, like every other candidate, is going to call for fencing, drones, armed guards at the border, that sort of thing. The truth of the matter is, on immigration, one of the easiest ways to get rid of immigration problems without having to build easily traversable obstacles is to enforce the employment restrictions. I've suggested things like, if you're an employer who's caught hiring illegal immigrants, then you should be fined $100,000 per immigrant and serve 1 year in jail per immigrant. Once we start throwing a couple of white boys who rich white boys in prison, I guarantee you that immigration will go down, and that this silly talk about easily breakable fences will go away. So that's how they took on immigration. Next, we get into the economy. Senator Graham is asked a question about the economy. He cites the unemployment numbers, the entitlement numbers. Now, he cites the U6, which is job participation, and he talks about the 90 million people who are out of work. Well, the fact of the matter is that number is misleading because it also includes retirees, soon-to-be retirees, and full-time students as being not participating in the workforce. And he also makes it seem as though that's an unusually high number in comparison to, say, our unemployment rate. When if you look at the charts of the U3, which is the traditional unemployment, which is at 5.3% now, and the U6, which is that 90 million number, which I think he said something like 80 million something. If you look at those, they track the same. The ups and downs, the peaks and valleys are pretty much identical. So there's nothing unusual about the Obama economy when it comes to unemployment. It's just that instead of using percentages, they're using real numbers, because saying 80 million sounds a lot better on stage than saying 30%. So he talks about how Hillary will, don't vote for Hillary. Hillary won't build Keystone. He will. Hillary won't get rid of Dodd-Frank, which is a banking regulation. He will. She won't repeal Obamacare, and he will. Which ironically harkens back to Mitt Romney saying that he could get unemployment under 6% with it by the end of his first term, which, if he was elected in 2012, would be 2017. Currently, without repealing Obamacare, and he said he had to repeal Obamacare to get to just under 6%. Currently, we're at 5.3% unemployment, and Obamacare is still going and has gone through 2 constitutional challenges in the Supreme Court. So he's rehashing the same argument that Mitt Romney gave. Oh, he also wanted to push the tough guy credentials, and he mentioned ISIS and spying on Russia and China as well. Most of the other guys, like Rick Santorum and Gilmore, all talk about cutting entitlements and cutting benefits. Santorum has something which he calls the 2020 Vision for America, which is a 20% flat tax, and he wants to basically cut welfare. He also takes credit for the horrible welfare reform that happened back in the Clinton era, so I'll give him that one. Bill Clinton made a mistake on that, and he's actually admitted it. Governor Gilmore, Jim, right? Governor Gilmore also talks about cutting back on entitlements and benefits, and his tax plan is a 3-tiered system, 10, 15, and 20% for income, and a flat corporate tax of 15%. He also talks about getting rid of the death tax, which in normal speak is the estate tax. And the estate tax only happens to estates that are worth $5 million or more. So 99% of Americans never pay the estate tax. They never see the estate tax. It is a non-issue. It only benefits people like the Walton family and the Koch brothers and these hedge fund managers that want to give billions upon billions of dollars to their kids who actually didn't earn it. I thought the Republican Party was all about making it yourself, building it yourself. Yes, you can. And they want to instill a Gilded Age hierarchy of the best way to make money is to inherit it. That is the plan, in a nutshell, for the Republicans on the economy. Governor Jindal got a question about Kasich taking the Medicaid expansion, and he didn't, and he talks about Obama and Clinton wanting evil socialism, evil European socialism, and that this is going to cost more down the road. He takes a jab at China, saying that they're the reason the Iran deal is bad because Obama can't negotiate, so, we let China walk all over us. And Governor Pataki was asked if Bobby Jindal was right, in which he said yes, and we have to take away Medicare, we have to take away entitlements, we have to kick people off of these aid programs, claiming that the benefits are too high and not addressing why the benefits are so high and the wages are so low. Oh well. They asked some more questions about the Iran deal. Spoiler alert, they all hate it. And that's about it for that. Then we get on to Roe versus Wade, and they pick on the only other right-wing religious fanatic in the group, Senator Rick Santorum. He mentions that Dred Scott, how Lincoln didn't follow Dred Scott universally. He said, "Sorry, Mr. Scott, but you are indeed the property, but I'm going to free every other slave." And he said that that he, as president, is going to apply that standard towards the SCOTUS ruling on gay marriage. So basically, he's going to ignore that gay marriage is legal in the United States and do what he can to outlaw gay marriage again. And the same with abortion, though he's going to fight for an amendment for both as president. Governor Gilmore was asked a question about how Hillary said that she would have a litmus test on Citizens United Supreme Court justices, and if Gilmore would do the same for abortion. He said he doesn't believe in litmus test for judicial nominees, but he wants people who follow the law, which of course is Republican speak for people who will rule the way that I want you to rule. And then for some reason, he went back to talking about how he was former military intelligence during the Cold War and how he's going to take on radical Islam. Oh, and I forgot to mention, radical Islam is the key phrase that they like using when it comes to terrorists from the Middle East. And we would be much farther along in the war on terror if President Obama just said radical Islam. Because when you say radical Islam, it makes a terrorist wings fall off or something. Now, I did a thing about acknowledging these people as religious versus ignoring them, and I still stand by my thing of not acknowledging them, not giving them the credit that they want. They want to be associated with Islam, and I don't want to give them what they want. But, Gilmore had to interject. And, of course, because abortion and gay marriage was brought up, the Planned Parenthood fake videos were also brought up. These are doctored videos, edited videos that have been debunked by a lot of major organizations, but they use it as a springboard to continue their fight against women and defund Planned Parenthood. People like George Pataki, who is pro-choice, said that he would ban federal money from going. He wants to defund Planned Parenthood, and he would ban federal money going towards abortions. And he wants a ban after 20 weeks instead of the 26 weeks. And he also made a claim that Hillary Clinton wants abortions up to the time of birth. So everybody wants to defund Planned Parenthood. Everybody wants a federal law banning federal dollars going to abortion, ignoring the fact that that's already been passed. And everyone but Pataki wants to ban abortion, and in many of the cases, they want to ban it regardless of the health of the mother or the fetus. Now, this claim about Hillary wanting abortion up to birth is unsubstantiated. That's just a cheap jab at him. So I'm not going to go over every one of these guys. I just kind of did the answers that they gave, and there's really nothing remarkable about it. On executive power, basically, it was a rush to see how fast they can undo every single one of Obama's executive orders. Governor Gilmore said he wants to get rid of the bad orders and void them, asserting that, he's going to fight ISIS and be the tough guy. Graham wants to get rid of NSA funding, the Iran deal. He had mentioned that he's ready to invade Iran on day one. Governor Jindal wants to repeal amnesty, even though there is no such thing going on. He wants to repeal Obamacare, which he can't do by executive order. I mean, he could refuse to enforce it. And he wants to get rid of sanctuary cities. He also wants to sign an executive order that bars the IRS from basically overseeing religious and Tea Party groups that could be using tax-exempt status not according to the law. Rick Perry wants Iran. They all want the Iran deal gone. They all talk about securing the border. They all want to end Obama's executive orders. So I don't need to go into any more. Most of them want specifically mention things like religious freedom, that sort of thing. Fiorina added EPA regulations, which I'm sure everybody else would agree with. So moving on. The next question that they asked is, how will you inspire people? Again, a stupid question. I really don't care. So we come to the end of the debate, and there wasn't much energy in the room because it was an empty stadium. It was going to be, the big boy table was going to come by a little bit later and be in the same place, and that was going to be filled with people at that point. So nobody stood out very remarkably. I would say if I had to pick a winner, it would be Carly Fiorina. I think she answered the questions most consistently within her circle. Governor Gilmore was just plain embarrassing. He showed that he was a misogynist and a sexist by interrupting Carly Fiorina. Senator Lindsey Graham, I don't know why he has to make himself look tough. Maybe there's some odd rumors about him or something like that. I do declare, I don't know. So he had to show off he was very tough. Rick Perry had to show off that he was tough but smart, but not too smart because he is a Republican and people like Rick Santorum don't like smart people. So he had to walk a fine line there. George Pataki proved that he was a nothing and a nobody, so, it's just plain ridiculous. So there we have it. That's the Kiddie Table debate. Next up will be the big boys. Thank you for joining me in this special episode of Screams from the Center. Please leave comments below on how I can improve. Please subscribe, like, and share my videos. You can find my blog at screamsfromthecenter.wordpress.com, on Twitter at screamsftcenter, and on Facebook and Google Plus at Screams from the Center. Thank you.